Praise be to Jesus, because Jesus is risen. Well, we're looking forward to the Easter season. At the moment, I'm sitting here and I'm reading about Freemasonry, and I really only got through a few pages of what I'm reading. And I thought, well, maybe I should stop and make a short video about this. Um, instead of waiting till I read a lot more and then making a lot longer video. Um, I think the what I'm going to read to you here is enough to think about and to, um, for you to really consider. I mean, some of you are going to say, yeah, it's entered, but, you know, I think as I read this, like little bells will go off, or actually big bells, or fireworks or something will go off uh, in your head. So I'm going to, I have some paragraphs, just about five of them, um, that I highlighted that I'm going to read to you. And here we go. In his book Anastasius and the Church of Our Time, Bishop Rudolf Graber quoted a Freemason who declared, quote, "The goal of Freemasonry is no longer the destruction of the church, but to make use of it by infiltrating it," unquote. Well, that's an interesting statement because a lot of people think that's exactly what's happened. Not 100%, but um, to some extent anyway. All right, so the next paragraph is, in other words, since Freemasonry cannot completely obliterate Christ's church, it plans not only to eradicate the influence of Catholicism in society, but also to use the church's structure as an instrument of renewal, progress, and enlightenment to further many of its own principles and goals. In other words, they're going to use the church. They're going to try to use the church um, to as an instrument with Freemasons at in important posts in the church. Whether or not that's the Pope or not, that's for each of us to decide. Um, but I mean, I think that's what gives way to the liberalism in the church. So the strategy advanced in the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita is astonishing in its audacity and cunning. From the start, the document tells of a process that will take decades to accomplish. Now, this instruction is is like a handbook of the plan of Freemasonry. Okay, so the people who drew up this book knew that it would take a long time. But here, let me continue. Those who drew up the document knew that this would not see its fulfillment, that they would not see its fulfillment. They were inaugurating a work that would be carried out by succeeding generations of the initiated. The permanent instructions state, in our ranks the soldier dies and the struggle goes on. The instruction calls for the dissemination of liberal ideas and axioms throughout society and within the institutions of the Catholic Church, so that laity, seminarians, clerics, and prelates would, over the years, gradually be imbued with progressive principles. Well, all this sort of speaks for itself now, doesn't it? Eventually, a pope would be elected from these ranks who would lead the church on the path of, quote, enlightenment and renewal, unquote. They stated that it was not their aim to place a Freemason on the chair of Peter. Their goal was to effect an environment that would eventually produce a pope and a hierarchy won over to the ideas of liberal Catholicism, but who would all the while believe themselves to be faithful Catholics. Boy, this is something else, isn't it? Well, I'm going to skip a little bit. I mean, I can't read the whole book to you, so I'm just trying to give you some thoughts here. For those who may believe the scheme to be too far-fetched, a goal too hopeless for the enemy to obtain, it should be noted that both Blessed Pope Pius IX, beatified in 2000, and Pope Leo XIII. Now, if you don't know who Pope Leo is, he was the Pope at the end of the 18th century who collapsed after Mass, I believe, in the company of others, and had a vision of a meeting between Christ and Satan, and Satan was taunting Christ, saying that he could destroy the church if he had more power, and Christ gave him more power in 100 years to do so. Um, and Pope Leo XIII asked that the permanent instruction be published, no doubt in order to prevent such a tragedy from taking place. So, what we have here is some two popes who are seeing or are aware of what's going to happen, and so they print this public instruction, all right, or this not public, permanent instruction gets published, all right, in order to alert people so that it doesn't happen. It's sort of like what Our Lady of Fatima did, telling us that Russia was going to turn communist, and to pray the rosary. She was warning us and telling us what to do to avoid that, and most people just passed it off. They thought, holy Russia, how could that ever happen? And, I think it was like 13 years later or 14 years later, that communism took over Russia. All right, so, however, if such a dark state of affairs would ever come about to pass, there would obviously be three unmistakable means of recognizing it. Okay? All right, the first means of recognizing it. It would produce an upheaval of such magnitude that the entire world would realize that there had been a major revolution inside the Catholic Church in line with modern ideas. It would be clear to all that an updating, quote unquote, had taken place. Oh, that sounds familiar to me. Number two, a new theology would be introduced that would be in contradiction to previous teachings. Number three, the Freemasons themselves would voice their cockadoodle of triumph, believing that the Catholic Church had finally seen the light on such points as equality of religions, the secular state, pluralism, and whatever other compromises had been achieved. Okay. So I'm on page 4, whether I'll make any more videos as I go along reading, But, I think this spells out pretty clearly, and if you really don't, if this doesn't really make any sense to you, if you think that, that this is really like, not true, or it's off target or something, I would hope that you'd realize that, you should say to yourself, or I'd like you to say to yourself, a lot of people believe that this is exactly what's going on nowadays, and really has been since, since Vatican II, more slowly at first, and now it's becoming more and more obvious. Our Lady of Good Success, one of the things she said was that the smoke of Satan would enter the Vatican shortly after the middle of the 20th century. And the middle of the 20th century is 1950. Shortly after that, like 1960, in other words, Vatican II. So, if you want to, if you think about this and pray about it and ask God to show you the truth, don't automatically say to yourself, oh, no, Pope Francis, I'm the first one to admit that Pope Francis says a lot of good things, but week after week there's some kind of problem, there's some kind of odd thing going on, and I can't blame it, or I don't blame it, and neither should any of us blame it on just, him. He's surrounded by very liberal people, people who I believe have been misled. I believe what they're doing is what they think is best, and that Pope Francis really has been shown a way forward. In certain matters of, the perennial teachings of the church. I think they really believe in what they're talking about and what they're promoting. So these are very difficult times, and it really requires a lot of prayer and a lot of humility on our part to get to the truth. So I would hope you do that. And as I read along, perhaps in the next few days I'll make another video, or possibly not. But, happy Easter to all of you. It's Easter evening when I'm making this video. And I hope you have a good Easter season. And we'll talk to you next time. All right, goodbye.